Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Startup Happy Hour. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and I'm here today with Sam Norton. He's the founder of Heron Farms, which is the world's first indoor saltwater farm. They're located in downtown Charleston, South Carolina right now, and they're planning to build another site this year. Very exciting stuff. Hey, Sam, how's it going?
Going really well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for being here. So this is, I have to say, this is a new area for me. I haven't had any guests on before who were even in the environmental startup space or the eco startup space. So this is brand new to me. I am not familiar with this at all. So I'm just going to let you take it away and tell everybody a little bit more about what Heron Farms.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It is an indoor vertical farm, but instead of using fresh water to irrigate the plants, we use salt water. And so the plants we use are what are called halophytes. They're salt tolerant plants that have evolved in salt marshes or in salt flats. Spent the last few million years trying to handle sodium chloride. And so there's just a few hundred of them on the planet and a few dozen of them that are edible and usable for agriculture. And the one that gets all the attention and the one that we grow is the genus Salicornia. It's the most salt-tolerant plant on the planet. And it's known in America as sea beans or sea pickle or sea asparagus. It's known in Europe as samphire or Salicornia. It's a delicious little leafless succulent that grows inconspicuously in the marsh and is now kind of the wheat or the corn of people doing saltwater agriculture because of its long history of use across many countries and its high salt tolerance and its ease of domestic breeding, basically. So we grow that plant.
Got it. And then what do you use that plant for? What do you use the ecosystem?
So we grow it indoors for food and strictly for the produce market. And so this plant was foraged for a long time by chefs and foragers and things like that. And it has a very short outdoor window of edibility because like most marsh plants, it flowers as the days get shorter. And so in a place like South Carolina, where I am, the plant starts to flower in about late July and is no longer edible. And so you really can only forage it from April to July. And so by bringing it indoors, we solved that photo period problem by just leaving the lights on. The plant thinks it's basically June 21st all the time. And the other reason for bringing the cultivation indoors is that what I've been I'm in my last semester of grad school. I've been studying this plant, and what we found with a lot of these big outdoor projects is they kept running into the same two problems, and that was if you need to pump seawater in, so you have to be by the coast, and people live by the coast. So the scalar goals of some of these big farms, like let's do 50,000 acres, well, the sites that were appropriate for that had people living there. And so you kind of had like the suit and tie guy from Europe or America come into rural Eritrea or Sonora, Mexico, or the UAE and say, look, this is marginal desert land. We're going to do a huge seawater farm. It didn't go over well. So land use constraints. The other one was if you pump seawater onto land and there isn't enough rain to flush out the sodium chloride, you'll still build up salt in the soil. And even this plant and other halophytes can't handle it after a few years. And so we brought produce production indoors to solve those problems.
And so with the plants that you're growing indoors, how, I guess, like, are you growing, or how quickly do these plants grow, and how much are you able, like, what are like the real life effects of it?
We have 1,000 square foot warehouse that can produce our highest selling SKU is a little 1 ounce package. We can produce a few thousand of those each week, so a few hundred pounds of food per week. And of course, that means that myself and the production manager are always thinking kind of a few plant cycles ahead, so that we're starting seeds at the correct time to never have any gap weeks. And that's what's key to some of our big kind of whale customers is no gap weeks. And same with restaurants. they're relying on us now to produce every week so that they can finally put this thing on their menu and not have it be a seasonal trend. And so part of that is producing every week. So yeah, a size of a grow room smaller than the house I'm in right now can produce a few hundred pounds a week if you keep it cranking.
That's incredible. Can you talk a little bit more about the setup or the technology behind it? Like, what does the inside of this warehouse look like, and how do you set up everything so that it's running, around the clock all year round?
Well, it's no different from a cannabis grow room or a lettuce grow room or anything like that in terms of the bones of it. I mean, we've also our first facility was in a shipping container farm, and that's a just fine method as well. People don't really like working in shipping containers because they're just a bit claustrophobic, but either way, it's all the same concept. It's a box inside a box that's kind of insulated. So in our case, it's a 3,600 square foot warehouse that was formerly used by a hardwood floors company. We went in, built a 6-inch thick box, and we built it ourselves and insulated the walls and lined the inside to make it waterproof and sanitary, and then basically combined irrigation with things that plants sit in and water flow and allowed computers to tell the lights when to turn on and when the pumps to turn on, which plants should get pumps at which time, and that sort of thing. So it's no different than a lettuce grow room or a cannabis grow room. It's more similar to cannabis because the plant we grow requires a lot of light. It evolved out in the salt marsh where it was very sunny, and lettuce evolved on the forest floor where it's not very sunny. And so the lights we use are common in the cannabis industry.
I know you said you're in grad school right now for this sort of thing, but do you have a background in, agriculture or anything like this? Or when you first got the idea for it, how were you able to transform that from an idea into reality? Like, was there a big learning curve? Did you have to read a lot on your own, or how did you learn how to actually put this into practice?
I don't have an ag background before coming into this project. The grad program I'm in is environmental science, and I basically, since my last year of undergrad, I was studying political science at the time, and I was getting really interested in what Boeing was doing with this plant. They were growing it at the Masdar Institute and using the seed oil for biofuels. Thought that was really fascinating because they were irrigating with just seawater, and Charleston has way too much seawater. It's becoming quite an issue as the seas rise. And so I realized that the plant that they were growing was the same plant that I had eaten growing up around the marshes around here. And so that got me really interested in the project. I got to meet the people at Boeing, wrote my capstone on it. After taking a break and kind of traveling around, I went back to grad school, started growing it indoors and outdoors, and getting more interested in hydroponics and some of the outdoor methods for marsh remediation. And yeah, it's just kind of evolved. A lot of help along the way. So I still don't know what I'm doing. I'm just, kind of getting the right people involved and figuring it out as we go.
Some of the most surprising things that you had to go through when you started Heron Farms and became a founder?
Well, there's been a lot of surprises. I mean, there's been some good stuff. The general, we have this interesting thing where we tell someone what we do, they either are like, why would you don't need that, there's plenty of fresh water, or they're like, oh my God, you guys are going to save the world. So we have this really interesting thing where people just don't care, or they care a lot about what we do. And so the people that do care, it allows us to get funding and allows us to have runway to develop and to bring on people, which costs money before you're selling enough. And so I'd say the big surprise in the beginning was how much eagerness there was on the part of the Department of Agriculture and other grant and other organizations that were looking for new ideas, how willing they were to kind of risk on agriculture, which of course just has really long timelines. It's not software. We can't iterate very fast. We have to let a plant grow and then change one parameter, then let it grow, so the main surprise in the founding of it recently has probably been, they say if you build it, they'll come, or whatever the quote is. And I was pretty gung-ho that would happen. And during our first 6 weeks of this new facility, coronavirus was still, and still is, a huge issue. And so we didn't see the customer base that we were expecting until basically the week before Christmas. And then it all came at once and some big whales jumped in. And so that's been a really nice surprise to have much larger corporations say they want to purchase more product than we can grow. And then the hardest surprise has probably been that when you're founding a company, you're thinking about like maybe the science or the business behind it and not as much about the HR. And so that's been for any founder, I imagine it's just kind of difficult. People have their own stories and it's really fun to work with a dynamic team, but it's also kind of difficult at times because everyone has their own needs and wants. And so that can be difficult to manage for a new founder.
Yeah, for sure. So having been through that now, what are some of your best tips for new founders who, maybe are experiencing for the first time having to manage people and deal with the HR and that sort of?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I'm a good example. I think I was a bit too micromanaging in the beginning, and I've let people kind of run with their own things now. We have the mentors that I had in a startup competition actually became investors, and so they've been very helpful in terms of guiding me through some of those HR processes. But the main one has been, give people clear goals and action items for a given week or month, and let them kind of run with it and not be too. I always wanted to I'll stay up all night on a spreadsheet, tinkering with it, and you got to just let people just run. So I'm not the best person for advice on that, but I would say just if you trust your team, just kind of let them go do their thing, and then stay up all night actually putting in the time too, because if they produce a document and you don't help out at the end tinkering with it before it's presented or something like that, then it does a disservice.
For sure. I think it's pretty incredible that you've been able to grow your team so fast too over the last year. How big is your team now?
There's eight people there's 8 and a few harvesters that are kind of part-time that come in as needed. So between 7 and 11 people at the warehouse on a day. That's
incredible for basically that's basically the growth that you had over just a year, right?
Last March, it was just me.
Wow. So it hasn't even, yeah, that's incredible. That's awesome. So another thing I was wondering is when you first started your indoor farm, was there a lot of trial and error involved? I guess I'm just not super familiar with the process, but in terms of how you built the environment, how much water was in there, how much, all of that did you just get it right off the bat, or was there a lot of, trial and error?
Oh gosh, yeah, mostly error. It started, there's a company down here called Vertical Roots. They are growing lettuce out of hundreds of shipping containers. They're a very established, big company, and their co-founder is a friend of mine. He kind of gave me my first couple of lights, and so I started in this little tent in a laboratory at College of Charleston, growing 36 plants at a time, and asked my thesis advisor, Dan McGlynn, how many times we've gotten emails or calls in the middle of the night, the lab is flooded. I've carried that same. That's happened at every farm. If you go on the Instagram of Plenty or Arrow Farms or one of this huge indoor farms, you see this pristine. There's lights and plants everywhere. What you don't see in the background is that things are leaking and It's a lot of trial and error, but this industry is very young. LEDs weren't really cost effective for anything besides cannabis until recently. So it's just a baby industry, and we're all kind of trying to figure it out.
Got it. And I know you guys are the world's first saltwater farm, but have any, and I know you're still, pretty new, like you said, back in last March, it was just you, but have any other companies or have there been any other founders that have sort of followed in your footsteps since a year ago?
Well, there's plenty of folks growing halophytes, these salt tolerant plants outdoors, and now we're seeing what are there's plenty of greenhouse production, and so those involve lights, and so they use lights to control photo period to keep flowering away. We're just the first to do it with no sunlight. There's a few companies in Europe that are going to be doing it without sunlight over the next couple of years. But so I've seen, there's been a lot of interest from young folks, undergraduates and other grad students who reach out to me and want to do their own projects at their house. I think we need to develop kind of a DIY kit for folks to work on. But I haven't met any founders who want to grow plants with salt water without the sun. It's just quite expensive to do it without the sun for your upfront costs. And so it doesn't make sense to practice really without the sun.
Got it. And so you said there's a lot of upfront costs involved, but obviously you're seeing in the end up saving money.
Well, it depends on your latitude, really. I mean, it's a lot. It's upfront. If you're building a grow room, you'll spend about 70% of the cost on your lights if you get good ones, and so the rest will be in HVAC and everything else you need. But it is a high cost of goods sold. It costs way more to grow indoors than outdoors, but you can supplement carbon dioxide in the indoor environment. You can leave the lights on 20 hours, 24 hours. You can, it has some flexibility to it. And one of the great things about it for us is that without having much competition or what have you, the indoor farm allows you to replicate quickly. And so if we wanted to have a shipping container in Maine a week from now, if the shipping container was ready to go, we could kind of get it up there and get it online if we could plug into water and electricity. The outdoor grows have more factors that need to be considered when they do a new farm.
I think it's super exciting that you're in such a new industry. Where do you see seawater agriculture, especially indoor seawater agriculture, being in, say, 20 years?
Well, I don't think it'll be too much different because the indoor space for agriculture really will just be surrounding about a dozen plants that have the right size and characteristics to be grown indoors. And the non-seawater space, we're going to see, there's a guy named Bruce Bugby who can lay this out way better. But basically, if a plant is ready for indoor growing when it has a high harvest index, and basically that just means did most of the biomass that was grown, is most of it usable? So like a tomato has kind of a lower harvest index because you're only eating the tomato part, but lettuce and the plant we grow, 90% of it can be harvested and sold. It's mostly water. And then of course, the other factor is market price. And so cannabis has a low harvest index, but a humongous market price. And so the seawater space will continue to be developed out of doors, and that's where we're going to see some interesting improvements. And so the method for the kind of logic for the last few decades has been, there's all this salt water and there's more salinized land each day. There's seawater intrusion to conventional farmland. Why don't we take corn and make it more salt tolerant? Well, that turns out there's a guy named Timothy Flowers who had worked on this a few decades ago. And the hope was that let's look at salicornia and these other halophytes and figure out the gene that is responsible for salt tolerance. And then they didn't know CRISPR was going to come around, but they basically said, we'll be able to use this genetic information and put it in corn or whatever, and we'll just have a bonanza. You just pump seawater into the Sahara and grow whatever you want. It turned out that the genetic information for salt tolerance, there's several mechanisms that control for salt tolerance in these plants, and each one of those mechanisms has this like cobweb of genetic information, so it's not quite as clean cut. And so what I'm getting at is the outdoor space will become more interesting as the analogs to freshwater crops get more domesticated. So there are plants, there's a salt tolerant version of, it's kind of like cotton, it's called bog cotton. Traditional reeds, Phragmites, it grows very fast and is salt tolerant to a certain point, and can be used for textiles. There's a company, very interesting company in the UK called Salty Co, who is, their tagline is freshwater free fabric. So I think in terms of the outdoor space, we're going to see the development of raw materials from seawater ag, and maybe it's not the right word because it's more saltwater ag, because one of the mistakes of the past 10 years has been, let's go use water from the Persian Gulf, and that's 40 parts per thousand. It's just too salty. But what we're seeing now is people being a little more realistic and using kind of brackish aquifers or brackish irrigation water to grow sort of mid-level halophytes and salt-tolerant plants for raw materials.
And so obviously a lot of this, is for the benefit of the environment as well, and has a lot of environmental ramifications for people listening who are maybe interested in, how does this help the environment? How can we continue down this path to help the environment? Can you break it down a little bit and explain how what you're doing now is benefiting the environment, and how people can contribute to keep helping the environment in similar ways?
Oh boy. Well, it doesn't help. I mean, these outdoor farms aren't going to help the environment that much. What they're trying to do is supplement the use of fresh water by using this other resource, seawater, which is much more available and we have more of each year while we have less fresh water. But the problem is that there aren't that many cases where you can do a monoculture that help the environment. Monocultures just kind of stink. And so if you bring that monoculture indoors, you'll save water usage and you'll save land space, but then you'll have a really high, our indoor farm produces more carbon dioxide than it sequesters inside of the plant. So that just on the back of a napkin math is not sustainable. And so what we do to counteract that is replant marsh that is outside of agriculture, that we are not going to fertilize or harvest. 1 cubic foot of succulent marsh plants can regenerate itself and store up to 8 or 10 pounds of dry weight carbon over the course of a few years. And so anyone saying that the indoor, the traditional argument for indoor ag is less water, less pesticides, less of everything, and they'll also argue that the energy usage of an LED is getting more efficient, and eventually you'll be able to use solar panels to do that. But then you've got to produce the LEDs and the solar panels and all that stuff too. So the environmental benefits will come if we replant the environment and leave it alone. A monoculture of Salicornia across the Sahara Desert would probably sequester a good bit of carbon, but will have unknown externalities. And so anytime someone is pitching the environmental benefits of agriculture, you really got to kind of pry into what they're doing, because monocultures are just, it's hard to, that's why we've got to replant marsh and leave it alone each spring. That's the best way we can think of to help the environment, because it doesn't need to be helped. That's the crazy thing. And I'm going on a rant here, but that's our ancestors are just like, what are y'all, stop trying to help things, just leave them alone. Like, you can't make it better until you stop messing it up. And so if you take the cues from the environment, the cue is leave it alone. And so that's what we do each spring, is go plant the right seeds at the right time in the right place of the marsh, and then just kind of leave it alone and let it be stochastic, and just whatever happens, let it go. So that was a long rant. Basically, the environmental benefits of indoor ag or outdoor seawater ag are limited.
Well, that's awesome that you guys are always going back every spring and replanting the marshes. Is that something that most, agriculture companies are doing, or is that more of a rarity?
They're not doing it yet. I'm going to hopefully publish a paper in the next 4 to 6 months on, it's called a conjoint analysis. It's like willingness to pay for a product which agrees to restore the environment. I think we'll see a lot more of this. I was on the way down to the Ace Basin recently, which is a large estuary we were talking about earlier in South Carolina. And I'm in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina, and I'm looking at different beers to choose from. And guess which one I chose? A 6-pack that Patagonia had produced, which replants a tree for every 6 beers. Now, so that's the kind of, and so there's Ecosia, which replants a tree every time you search with their search engine. In terms of other agricultural companies matching like we do, a pound of food sold is 1 square foot replanted. We're not seeing that yet, but I think we will, because whether this paper is published or not, I think the sentiment of the consumer is that if you're willing to replant the environment, I'll pay a little bit more for a given product, especially non-commodities.
I think there's a lot of positive pressure from society and from consumers in general that is, encouraging businesses to incorporate more eco-friendly practices or things like that into their business, which is great. It's a great example of positive peer pressure, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, so I know this year you've got some big plans to open your second location. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Where are you planning on doing this? And then, beyond 2021, what's your vision for Heron Farms?
Well, I mean, I think we'll probably see a little more development from us in the outdoor space, but because there's really that need for raw materials, and just the cost of goods sold doing that outdoors is much better. The scale is much better. But in terms of the next indoor farm, I think you'd probably see us go somewhere in the U.S. to one of our biggest. It makes sense for us to kind of like buddy up with our biggest customers and kind of go closer to their fulfillment warehouses. So that's in the picture. We've talked to people in the UAE. We've talked to the Saudi NEOM project, which is a new initiative, kind of like basically a new city they're building in between Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Israel. We maybe build a small demonstration farm at the COP26 conference in Glasgow this summer. That would be really fun. Seawater Solutions is a company in Europe that's kind of spearheading that initiative to get us over there, and so that could happen. But I think in terms of a commercial farm, it will be probably in the U.S. at one of these larger markets for us, East or West Coast. We'll just have to determine what the best method is going forward. And I think it's kind of one of those things. It's like once you have a stampable model, you can kind of go haywire. But I don't think we'll have more than, we're not going to go from 1 to 5 facilities. I think we'll do our next facility and kind of let the industry play itself out and not try to scale too big. That's been one of the problems I've seen with the indoor ag spaces. Kind of swinging for the fences with technology that is improving so rapidly that you might not want to do that. So like if you spend a few $1 million on LEDs that are going to be 7% more efficient just the next year, scale a bit slower. But there's good reason for it. So who knows? But yeah, I'll probably, our next commercial farm will be in the U.S.
Yeah, I feel like that's a common theme that I've heard from past guests too, is that most people, when they think about go, and you gotta, just go and get things done, move really fast. But I've actually seen some of the most successful startups are the ones that are patient and, scale slowly and, have the patience to go through the process and do it sort of the right way and smartly, instead of just act impulsively and, just wanting to get the next big thing launched, or whatever the case may be. So I do think that's a good strategy for a lot of businesses. Sounds like definitely for the agriculture industry, that's the way to go. So Sam, tell people a little bit more about who you are outside of work. It sounds like, agriculture and thinking about this stuff is a big part of your life. You're in grad school for it. You're writing thesis and papers on it and things like that. But outside of agriculture, do you have any other hobbies? Who are you as a person outside of work? What do you like to do?
Well, yeah, the pandemic didn't change my life that much because besides pick up basketball and football, I wasn't really, I was just, I don't know how vulnerable I'm supposed to be at this point, but basically I was just a degenerate between the ages of 18 and 22. And I'm kind of reeling from that, I guess, and just not really going out too much. So I play guitar and banjo and mandolin with friends. And then I don't have social media. One of the people on my team has gotten me to do LinkedIn, which is really interesting, but no TV. So I don't know, I'm building my house down in the Ace Basin. It's a 17-acre forest in the middle of this protected, this kind of swamp area. So I like to be outdoors and build stuff out of wood. My dad's carpenter. And I like to play a lot of basketball and football and surf and go fishing, although my girlfriend's always kind of making fun of me I don't catch a lot. Even though I talk a big game and say I'm going to bring us home dinner, it's usually like just leftover bait. Yeah, we have such small circles now because of Corona. So I used to really love being on campus and kind of interacting with undergrads and other grad students, and that's been diminished. So, but yeah, my day-to-day is not super interesting. I try to get out to the Ace Basin as much as I can. It's about a 40-minute drive from where I am right now in downtown Charleston, and look at birds. I don't know, stuff like that.
I love that. I have to ask a little more about the just not having social media or technology or things like that, just because that's, it's so rare. I don't think a person who isn't on any social media or doesn't have a TV. Is that just sort of like the lifestyle you've always lived, or is there a reason for that? And is it hard to live like that when everybody else is all over social media? Or is it sort of just like, you've never had it, you don't feel like you're missing out on anything, and life is great?
No, it's that I had all of those things and I know I'm not missing out on them anymore. When I was just kind of going out all the time, and my normal day-to-day was like do a little bit as minimal school as possible and watch TV, go on all the social media channels all day, play video games, go out at night and stay up too late. And so I kind of just, at one point in my last year of undergrad, I moved into a studio apartment, and in the move process, I was kind of like, maybe I will just stop all this stuff. And so when I moved in that apartment, I got rid of my cell phone and all the social media, and the TV and all that kind of stuff. And so I went a year without a cell phone. That turned out to be really, I think some of my friends hated it, but because sometimes I would use their cell phone to like communicate if I really had to, so I wasn't like all isolated. But when you don't have a cell phone or any of that kind of stuff, you are forced to just be like, and you just are very bored. And that boredom turns into, what should I do with my hands? And it turns into kind of reading or writing or drawing or something, so I recommend it. I have Instagram for Heron Farms. Kate helps and Libby help run most of it, but I post quizzes a few nights a week, and I recommend it. I watched a show with my girlfriend called Mandalorian, which is probably the best thing I've ever seen. But no, I recommend if when my when my when I'm able to get back to the lifestyle of not having a cell phone, I will do that. It's very liberating, and you don't feel like you're missing out at all. In fact, you walk around and you're like looking at other people, and you're like, get off that thing. There's so much out here.
For sure. I'm like jealous of your life because I have had times where I'll run out and not bring my cell phone. This is just for like a few hours out of my day. And it's so liberating, like not having to constantly check, oh, do I have a notification? Do I have any missed messages? Anything like that. Like just having nothing to worry about. My entire life is basically on technology since I'm in that world and that's how I do my job. But no, I'm jealous of that lifestyle. I think that's awesome that you're able to do it. And kudos to you. And, hopefully, I don't know how you're going to get to a day when you don't have to use your cell phone. I just feel like that's how do you communicate with anybody without a cell phone? But who knows? Maybe you can go back to flip phone. I don't know if they still make those or just something a little less distracting.
Well, so I'm not a Luddite. Like I've got, I'm on this desktop right here, and I love statistical programming and spread. I love Google Sheets. I just love the spreadsheets in general. So I'm not a Luddite. It's just that I'm staring at a screen for most of my job. I mean, I'm either looking at plants or a screen, or I'm talking to somebody at work. But one of the nice things about it is that this is the main argument for why you should have social media that I hear from people all the time, is they want to keep up with their family and friends. But the truth is that when you aren't keeping up with a friend on social media, and then you do see them 4 or 6 months later, you really have genuine, like, what have you been doing? I really want to know. I have no clue. What have you been up to? And it's much more genuine, I feel like, than, hey, how's it going? I've been watching your stories every single day. I know exactly what you've been up to. So, yeah, I don't know. I won't get any social media probably. So.
That is, I feel like I'm like having a whole new experience just hearing you talk about that. Like meeting up with a friend that you haven't been following on social media for the last 6 months. Like that feeling is like totally foreign to me at this point. That's awesome.
That's kind of nice.
I'm sure. Yeah, I bet. Maybe I will give that a try too. Who knows? We'll see.
Can I say, Diana, one more thing about that? I know this is a bit of a rant at this point. This is like 10 seconds. One thing I've noticed just from having Instagram for work is that it causes me to compare myself all the time. Like anytime I use our work Instagram, I will compare myself to some other person my age that had done better at investing or their startup or at school. And there's no way, maybe that is healthy. It might make me work harder, but I just can't see that being healthy for me to just always be comparing myself to other folks. Last thing about it.
You're totally right. 100%. Yeah. I think it's impossible to be on social media and not compare yourself at all, to the next the next person who's your age in your town or doing the same business you're doing or whatever the case may be. You're 100% right. That's awesome, Sam. Okay, so to wrap us up here, I like to end with a little game, and this season we are doing a new game. This is just a get to know Sam game. I've got a list of just random fun questions. They're not related to your business or agriculture or anything like that. It's just a way for people to kind of get into your mind a little bit more. So first question, if you were stranded on a desert island with only one other person, who would you want that person to be? And this can be somebody who's dead or alive.
If I don't say my girlfriend, I'll be in the doghouse. If I don't say my mom, I'll be in the doghouse. If I don't say my niece, I'll also be in the doghouse. But the real answer is probably somebody from the 18th century. I don't know. Thomas Jefferson. People really hate that as a choice right now. I don't know. Wendell Berry.
Can you explain why?
I think that'd be pretty interesting. He's like the grandpa you always wanted. He's kind of like the prophet of the sustainable ag industry. He would absolutely hate the concept of an indoor farm. He probably does, but he would be a really interesting person to be on an island with, because somehow he'd probably grow some food and it'd be delicious. So I would pick Wendell Berry.
And it would help you survive. So he's got the survival skills too. Nice. I like that
Exactly.
answer.
He'd have a lot of good stories.
I like it. Keep you entertained. He's a good choice for entertainment and for practical reasons, survival, things like that.
Definitely.
All right. Next question. If you could be any animal, what animal would you be?
Red-tailed hawk.
Oh, that's very specific. Why?
They have a really cool screech, and they get an excellent view of the surroundings, and they're, or maybe an owl. Yeah, red-tailed hawk. And they have a great diet. Like, they could just go down and grab a delicious fish, or they can go down and have a nice little, little mammal to eat. It'd probably be a red-tailed hawk.
Nice. All right. Next question. If you could live anywhere in the world other than where you live now, where would you want to live?
I haven't been that many places. I'd probably say I'd probably go back to the border of France and Spain. I lived there for a while. I'd probably go back there and just so I could eat olives all the time and good bread. The tragedy of America is that we don't have like a baker on every corner. It's just unfortunate. And so I would just eat bread and olives all the time on the border of France and Spain.
That's amazing. What were you doing living there?
I was doing a program called Woofing worldwide. Yeah. So I was working for a nonprofit called Wanakase, and they were up in the Pyrenees on the border, and there's a hiking trail along the Pyrenees. And so we would go along, and it's mostly at that portion, it was mostly cork oaks. So these oak trees that the bark is what you make a cork out of. And so they strip everything there in this portion is all cork oaks left over from this industry. And so we would trim back the cork oaks and plant fruit trees and nut trees along the trail so that there would be food for hikers in a few years. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, cool. That's something that I've always wanted to do that I didn't get a chance to do. And when the pandemic hit last year, I was thinking like, this would be the perfect time to go live on a farm in like Australia or New Zealand and just wolf for a year, or until whenever the pandemic's over.
You should do it. I mean, you'll never be that far from, most of the wolf hosts have internet, so you could probably still do the podcast very, very well. I mean, it was fun. My host, I didn't tell you this part. I left within like a few weeks and traveled around Spain because my host was such a jerk. But maybe I was being a jerk, but we didn't get along. He hated Americans, and I'm American, and I'm from the South of America. Not from South America, but I'm from the deep South. And so anyways, I just ended up traveling around Spain and Portugal on my own and leaving that wolf situation, but it was fun.
Well, sorry to hear about that, but it sounds like it worked out fine for you.
It was fine. I just realized, like, wait a second, I don't have to work for this guy. That's why I came over here, to not have a boss. So I just went on.
That's totally fair. All right, next question. If you could go back and redo college knowing what you know now, what's one thing that you would do differently?
Oh, gosh. I got an actual chance to do that because I got kicked out of college as an undergraduate. And part of getting rid of all the social media and stuff allowed me to be like, what the hell am I doing? I can just go back and do this correctly. And so I got a chance to do that. And the main thing I learned was that you should get to know your professors. I mean, that is like the easiest one tip that any student that's listening to this can implement right now, is to read your professor's literature. I'm like, go to their office hours. Guess what? You're more likely to get a better grade. It's just so, I never thought about this my first time in college, but then I realized, like, these are people that go home and they like have to use the bathroom and they have to eat, and they're just normal people. And guess what? They care a lot about what you're writing, and they have to take all this time grading. Why don't you read their papers? And so I started doing that and getting really interested into what my professors each semester were doing in their own published body. And that was the best thing I could do. So I'd probably go get a PhD. If I had to change anything, I would make sure I went further from, I'd probably go further from home. That's what I would change. I would go to a different college.
Got it. So I take it that you went to college. Are you from South Carolina originally? You went to college?
I am,
Okay,
yeah.
got it. So you kind of went, close to home. I did the same thing. I wanted to go far too, but I mean, it's never too late. You still have the rest of your life to live in other places
Absolutely.
and see the world. All right, next question.
Absolutely.
If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would you eat?
Grits.
What?
That's easy. That's the easiest
Like plain,
question.
okay, but
Yeah.
plain grits or grits with something? Like, what do you put in your grits?
So to make them properly, I don't want to give this away too much. We basically need to put 3 cups of water and 1 cup of heavy cream, add some butter. I know the vegan folk, my friends are just like, what? So yeah, and salt and pepper. I mean, it's just, here's the main thing. People don't like grits just like they don't like tomatoes that they buy from Harris Teeter because it's corporate-y baloney. But if you get some proper grits that are milled with stone that are from South Carolina, that's the easy choice. That's the thing I would eat every day.
Sounds like I need to go down to South Carolina or just the South and experience some real authentic grits.
I'll make you some. Yeah, I don't know how they'll ship, but yeah, we can do that next time you're down here.
Awesome. Charleston is actually on my list of places that I want to go to because I've never been there before.
It should be. It's a really nice place. It's got like a lot of the South's got it's trying to grapple with its own bad history, but it is very beautiful and nice place to be. Mostly because I've been to every city I've been to has the same phenomenon where you walk down the street and no one acknowledges you, and it kind of makes sense because there's a lot of people. But like in the South, you walk down the street and people are say hello, and it's just very nice to have another primate be like, hello, how are you? Even though I know it freaks people out that are from New York or Boston. They're like, what do you want from me?
I was just going to say, you're going to hate me for saying this, but that freaks me out. When a stranger on the street wants to talk to me, I'm like, but why?
Yeah. My cousin moved down from Boston, and like her first week down here, she's in the grocery store and someone said, how's it going? And she was like, why? So no, that's my favorite thing about the South is that people, your neighbors, and I like that part.
I get it. I think it's whatever you grew up around and what you're used to is what feels good to you. All right, last question. If you could have any job other than the one that you have now, which, sounds pretty good, but if you couldn't have the job that you have now, what job would you want? And this is like, if you don't have to consider any practical factors.
Probably play in the NBA. That'd be pretty fun. But I'm hopefully going to work towards this over the next couple of decades, but I'd like to just do woodwork, and like be in a woodworking studio. I like doing that kind of stuff and do some statistics. I still like statistics a lot. So yeah, I'd play in the NBA.
Nice.
I'd be terrible. I'm so bad.
Hey, well, that's why the question is practical factors aside, what's like your sort of dream, unrealistic fantasy dream job sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I can get a few assists per game.
Nice. Yeah, you could be a point guard. I don't know how tall you are. Can never tell over
6 foot.
There you go. You could definitely do it.
I think so.
I'm rooting for you.
I'm inspired. Thank you. When I get off this call, I'm going to go. I will not go back to Heron Farms. I'm going to go get a basketball and try and make this a reality.
Nice. I was going to say you should take some videos and put it on social media, but you're not there. But maybe Libby or Kate can do that and throw it on the Heron Farms and be like, hey, our founder is very multi-talented. He's also could be qualified to be an NBA player.
Deal. I'm getting close to, I can finally grab the rim, like once you can really grab it, then if you can palm a basketball and you can get your wrist over the rim, you can dunk. And so my my neighbor, my quarantine buddy that I play basketball with, we're both trying to dunk, and so we're getting close. About an inch to go. I will send you a video if it ever happens.
Yeah. Okay. You have to. If it does happen, you have to send a video. I want to see that.
Deal.
All right, cool. Well, before you go, Sam, this was really great. I really appreciate you taking the time and exposing our listeners to a totally new area that we haven't covered on the podcast at all. So I really appreciate that. But before you go, just tell people where they can find you. I know you're not very easy to find since you're off the social media, but if they wanted to get in touch with you and learn more about what you have to say, or if they want to learn about Heron Farms, tell people how they can do that.
Well, they can just email me at sam@heronfarms.com, go to the Heron Farms website, reach out to Libby and Kate, send us a message on Instagram, or come on down to Charleston. I guess that's not going to happen in the pandemic, but no, we're pretty easy to reach. I have LinkedIn now, so I think that has the contact stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, go message the Heron Farms Instagram and you can get to Sam through all of those channels. Thank you so much, Sam, for being here again. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and we will be back again soon with another episode of Startup Happy Hour.